Good evening. I'm Gracelyn Guyol, and welcome to Inspiring Local Nonprofits. Tonight's guest is David Prescott, South County Coastkeeper for Save the Bay in their Westerly office. David is their Coastkeeper, and he provides a visible on-the-water presence that protects, restores, and helps promote stewardship of Little Narragansett Bay and the south coast of Rhode Island. His background is in marine biology, environmental chemistry, and marine policy, and he has over 15 years of experience in this coastal environmental protection, conservation, and outreach program. Welcome, Dave. It's great to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Tell viewers a little history of Save the Bay and how the Westerly office came to be.
Sure. Save the Bay started in 1970. It was a group of concerned citizens had gotten together to actually fight a couple of energy projects that were planned for the shores of Narragansett Bay. That group eventually became what is known now as Save the Bay. And they've been working ever since in not only in the neighboring communities of the bay, but also in the watershed. In 2007, we were actually asked to establish a presence down in Westerly and Stonington in Little Narragansett Bay. Mm-hmm. And so that was when the office was established, and then basically several years after, we actually officially established the South Coast Center, which is more of an education and outreach exploration center in downtown Westerly.
Okay. What is the Save the Bay's primary mission and then your office's mission?
The primary mission of Save the Bay is pretty short and sweet. It's to protect Narragansett Bay. The mission for the Westerly office expands upon that, and it covers the coastal waters and the watershed of Narragansett Bay itself.
So its watershed is on the land and emptying into the ocean.
Yes, correct,
right.
As well as the neighboring coastal waters. So that includes the south coast of Rhode Island and Little Narragansett Bay as well.
Okay, and your role as South County Coastkeeper, what's involved there? And I think you have a wonderful picture of Little Narragansett Bay that
over the overflight.
Yeah,
yes,
there,
yep.
There.
So there's a nice overflight there, looking down at Nappertree Point and Watch Hill, mm-hmm. Looking across to Sandy Point and to Stonington and Stonington Borough. So I always get questions about the Coastkeeper title and whatnot. I am one of over 280 waterkeepers around the country and around the world. The Waterkeeper Alliance, we all serve as basically the eyes and ears for the different water resources. So we have, not only do we have coastkeepers like myself, we have river keepers, bayou keepers, sound keepers, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And the responsibility of that position is to act as an advocate for the local water, to look at development that would impact our local waters, to make sure that our waters are safe to swim and fish, shellfish from, and drink in the case of freshwater systems. So that's a little bit about the overall waterkeeper roles. My role is specifically about protection of the south coast of Rhode Island, including Little Narragansett Bay. And that basically stretches from Stonington, Connecticut, all the way to the Massachusetts border. Most of my efforts focus on Little Narragansett Bay and the lower Pawcatuck River, the estuary itself. And I focus on water quality, including stormwater and runoff and whatnot. I focus a lot on climate change. That's become definitely a huge, huge topic,
looming issue.
Yeah, and one that we don't a lot of people don't want to talk about. Mm-hmm. And that includes coastal erosion, sea level rise, and even impacts to local habitats as well. So those are the two main things that I really focus on. There's a lot of other things looking at development and whatnot, and energy projects and so forth.
And as the Coastkeeper, you attend a lot of local meetings,
Yep.
town meetings,
Yep.
and state meetings,
Yes.
and you physically, I don't know, maybe you'll talk about that later, physically oversee the testing of the waters in the
Yes.
Pawcatuck River,
Yep.
and that's a big part of what you do in the summertime.
That's a really big part. In order for me to be a true advocate for Little Narragansett Bay and the lower Pawcatuck, I really have to understand the issues, and as part of understanding the issues is becoming, learning all about it. You can never learn enough about whether it's a water body or a park or anything. So my role is really to get out there, to see what is happening on the water, and that's the kind of the visible on the water presence, but it's also in the community, because it can't just be that I spend all my time on the water, but that's an important part. So currently at this point we have 8 years of water quality testing that we have done with URI's Watershed Watch program, and we go out twice a month from May through October, and so we have a pretty good start to a database, in
Yes.
terms of some really good data that we can actually use to make changes on the state and the local level.
To document to the local entities what's going on.
It
It's
is.
not just a feeling, it's science.
It is. It's science.
And you need that.
And water quality is a lot more challenging. Part of this goes back to our history at Save the Bay in the 70s. It was a lot easier back then to know where pollution was coming from. Our rivers were different colors. You look at the Pawcatuck River, you had
Yes.
these dye factories, and they were different colors based upon that. You had toxins coming directly out of storm drains. It was really easy to be able to point and say, we know who's polluting. Now you look at the water, and from the surface, everything looks great. It's like, oh, it's clean, it's clear. But that's why the water quality testing is so important, because of the fact that you learn more about the chemistry, and the chemistry is the part that can be troubling. High bacteria loads, high nutrient loads, low dissolved oxygen numbers that cause that aren't high enough for fish
to die.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's a lot more challenging in terms of
It's much more
identifying.
minute detail.
It is. It's a lot more challenging in terms of really trying to identify the true sources, because again, it's not a factory. It has to do with everything that all of us collectively do.
Right, residents
Yes.
that are things from residents who live here and visitors and the tourists who come
Yes.
are adding pollution that they're unaware of.
Yes.
And so documenting what and where it's coming from, and then figuring out how to reduce the influx is a big part of your job.
It is. Yeah, it's a challenging part.
Yes.
It's very challenging at times.
And I think also sometimes hearing at all those meetings, hearing all of the different perspectives
Yes.
is really important for you to be able to weigh and balance and be aware of how other people are perceiving what's going on.
With anything, I think that's one of the biggest pieces to this is to really understand where all the user groups are coming from. Whether it's from a lack of understanding or whatnot, and it's again it's challenging and complicated. So.
Well, what do you think the biggest challenge is?
And I always go back and forth between two of them, because there's always always the issue of climate change is always looming in the background, and it's really looming over everything.
That's the gorilla in the room.
It completely is, and so I think that's a major issue on so many different levels, and it affects everything from the food we eat to the water we swim in to the water we drink to everything. One of the greatest challenges is basically runoff from the land. Old infrastructure. A lot of our communities have really old and outdated infrastructure.
Septic systems.
Septic systems. Drinking water supplies. You look at the issue in Flint.
Yes.
And that's troubling on so many different levels. But that's just not one community that's suffering that. That's nationwide.
Yes, we are an old country now,
Yeah.
and we have a lot of old infrastructure and lead pipes. Yep. And corroding concrete facilities, and so it's...
and everything's paved. So after rainstorms, so here again, climate comes back into that. When we have more frequent, intense rainstorms, we have more runoff carrying all the toxins off of our properties, off the roads and whatnot, and making the waters not as safe as we want to. You know, the Clean Water Act was established to make sure it was safe to swim and fish and drink our water. Yet, you know, after rainstorms, when the bacteria levels are highly elevated, you don't want to be swimming in that. You know, as I'm a surfer,
right?
And so I've gotten sick from polluted sewage in the water. So it's, you know, I don't want anyone to go through that. We shouldn't have to deal with that, but that is
a reality.
It's a reality, and these are the issues that we have to deal with and really have to get control of.
Right. So, what are the predictions for climate change and sea level rise?
Well, it's another one that's complicated because they constantly keep changing. So I'll tell you a little bit about what has been happening in Rhode Island. For the last 5 to 8 or so years, our Coastal Resources Council has been using the numbers of 3 to 5 feet of sea level rise by the year 2100. They have recently updated those numbers to now look at closer to 7 feet by 2100. So you think about all these communities that are right on the shores of, whether it's Little Narragansett Bay or Long Island, or Narragansett Bay or wherever, that adding even 4 to 5 feet is challenging. So the numbers aren't great. And again, we have communities that are already well established. We have infrastructure that is in our grounds. We have the wires going across. You know, we have homes. We have businesses, and you start to look at even the challenges today during some high tide cycles, where you see these areas flooded on a fairly frequent basis. And it's kind of a prediction.
And they're going to be underwater all the time.
And they are. And this is a prediction of the future of what things are looking with. So sections of communities like Watch Hill, you know, right down there by the harbor, nearly every high tide, the water is coming through the walls and flooding the parking lot there. It's a lot worse during the moon tides, when you have 1.5 to 2 feet of water. But this is the future that we're looking at, and it's hard to. These decisions are really challenging in terms of can you move the infrastructure? Do you build a big wall?
Build a dike.
Do you build a dike? You know, and
then you lose your sea view. And
you lose your beaches and everything. You know, and you lose your access. So there's no easy solution. I'm always searching for something that say, oh, this is perfect, but it's not, because it complicates things when you take into account personalities and emotion and history.
And the value of coastal property.
Property taxes that these coastal communities really rely on. It's very, very challenging. And that's just from the human perspective side of things, not just not the ecosystem side of things.
That's right.
So,
well, you think we've got a problem here, think about Florida.
Yeah.
The highest place in Florida is 10 feet above sea level. The whole state's going to be underwater.
Exactly.
So we do have challenges that, you know, we're looking at 80 years ahead, but it's going to take that long to solve these.
Some of this. And even, again, I was talking about the 5 to 7 feet or 4 to 7 feet by 2100. They're saying within the next 20 years, we're looking at an additional foot of sea level rise. That's significant.
Yes.
20 years, because that is a time frame that we can all relate to.
Well, that's in our lifetime,
Exactly.
so we can't push it off to somebody else solving it in the future.
I can't push it off to my kids and say, well, you know, I'm hoping for the best.
I think we had a Marsh photograph. I haven't watched the monitors, so have we shown that? Oh. Okay, talk about this.
Sure. So again, we talked a little bit about the human perspective in higher sea levels. From an ecosystem perspective, our habitats are challenged.
And you mean by the marshes? Habitat for what? Where?
So the different coastal habitats are going to be challenged by climate change, and we're already seeing that.
Okay.
As more water is flooding our communities, it's also flooding our marshes. And that's normal. But in a lot of cases, because we've altered our marshes so much, there's nowhere for that water to go. So we're getting changes in species diversity. We're getting complete die-off of marsh vegetation. And then the other challenge is that we've developed so much of that property adjacent to marshes, so that when you think about marshes being actually able to migrate, you know, they are resilient if they're given the chance.
Right.
But if you have a seawall, or you have a home and that marsh is trying to move towards that, there's no place for it to go to. And that's a really big challenge because we're losing all the ecosystem services that salt marshes provide.
Well, they help prevent flooding.
They prevent flooding. They're a huge filter.
Yes.
They're a nursery for the majority of fish that we enjoy. You know, they are an important habitat and, you know, and food source. So all of those services that are provided by the marsh are now being challenged by higher waters. And we are starting to work on some projects. We have a couple projects that are going on in the next couple of years where we're actually looking at a technique called thin layer deposition, which basically is taking material that would be dredged from a breachway or some other source, like from a pond, and instead of putting it on a beach, putting it back onto the marsh to help raise the elevation of the marsh, to give the marsh a little bit more of a fighting chance in the future. It's not a end all, but at least giving a little bit more of a fighting chance so that we can preserve those services that the marsh provides.
Yes, because the marshes are very important, not just to the fish, but to us for flooding
and historically, we've looked at them as slimy, stinky, smelly. We've filled them, we've put houses on them, and only now we're saying, ooh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. You know, so it's challenging. It really is.
How do you help communities move forward in supporting clean water efforts?
In this region, tourism is huge. It's enormous. Mm-hmm. People come here because of our beaches and our bays and our salt ponds and our coasts. And the last thing we would want is for a big sign to be posted that no swimming, the water is contaminated. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the ways to move forward with that is to have the conversation and to not just have it once, but to have it on a very frequent basis, to talk about these are the challenges that we face. This is the data that we have that not only we're getting, but other groups are taking as well. The states are taking, the federal agencies are taking, and they're all showing the same thing. They're showing that we do have water quality issues. So, but when push comes to shove, a lot of those changes have to happen on the town level. So involvement in the town is very, very important. So over the years, we have sponsored several bi-state workshops to get all of the players at the table to discuss these issues.
All the town employees that are responsible for these areas.
Yes, exactly. So town employees, town councils, selectmen, state staff, federal staff, nonprofits, because a lot of the local environmental nonprofits have such a huge role in terms of implementation of some of these pilot projects like rain gardens and fertilizer, or working with fertilizer and reduction of fertilizer and whatnot. So really the nonprofits play a really
they're a leadership role.
It is a huge leadership role, yes.
Right, and that's really important to affecting change, because the towns will follow the local leaders, yes. And their staff doesn't always have time to explore new options. They're busy just keeping things going.
Exactly.
Describe some of the challenges that you experience working across state borders, because you're right on the boundary with, I live in Connecticut, you live in Westerly, right. So how do you deal with that?
Well, it is challenging. Again, we have challenges everywhere. But
you're good at it.
Oh, thank you. Communication is a big piece of that. The local ordinances, the state laws and state regulations are different on either side. Mm-hmm. It would be great if they matched up, but they don't. And so that
it's unlikely they will.
And yeah, it is. And it's really hard to say to one community, well, you can't just worry about the fish on your side of the river. You have to think about the fish, because they don't care. Fish don't care. Birds don't care. I'm in Rhode Island. I'm in Connecticut. I'm back and forth. So part of the way we do that, again, is through communication and outreach efforts such as the bi-state workshops that we've had and whatnot. The other piece has to do with again, providing that support. Towns can't do everything, so when nonprofits can come in there and help with education, such as storm drain markings or planting rain gardens that can be used as educational opportunities for not just the town, but also for the individuals to help with all those. So it is challenging, and really the best way to deal with those challenges is to make sure you have all the right players at the table at all times.
And keep singing the same song, because it doesn't get through the first time you hear it. They have to hear it over and over, and then finally it becomes, oh yeah, everybody knows that.
And you really have to relate it back to economics. There's always an economic driver to it. Again, our beaches are a huge economic driver.
You have so much revenue from those beach draw.
Yep, Irene and Superstorm Sandy, they did a lot of damage, and it was important to try to move back. Things have changed. Coastal dunes are further back. People have sometimes moved their structures back. Like the town beach in Westerly has actually moved the pavilion back about 30 or so feet. So things have changed, but it's important that
it continue to change.
Yep, and again, stressing those economic factors of why clean water and clean beaches are really important for us.
Well, I want you to talk about some of the achievements you're most proud of, and I know you have a photograph here, a water quality photo somewhere.
So I'm definitely proud of the fact that we've been able to get 8 years of water quality testing. That's actually one of our volunteers out there actually looking through a refractometer, looking at the amount of salt in the water. And that determines what kind of animals live there and what plants would survive in that area and whatnot. But the 8 years of testing is a great start. We have a long way to go.
Well, and explain just briefly why so many years of testing is so important.
It's all got to climate now. We've had the different weather patterns, different seasons and whatnot. Some summers are really, really warm, and that raises the water temperature. It lowers the dissolved oxygen for the animals that need it. Other summers are really rainy, so that's increasing the amount of runoff coming off the land. So that's increasing the bacteria load and the nutrient load. Every single season is different.
The data is different.
And you cannot start to make really any assumptions until you have at least 5 years of data. And really, I'm looking more towards 20, 25, 30, 40, 50 years of data, so we can have a better understanding of that. Yes, we have 8 years.
Well, and that will also show you trends.
Yes, and you can do a better job at looking at the trends over time, and kind of understanding the system and which areas need to be addressed, such as downtown areas with old storm drains or whatnot. So
right, the polluted areas will consistently remain polluted.
Yep.
They're really ones that you need to focus on, and that comes back to economics too. Where do you spend your dollars in cleanup?
Yep, and so after this past summer, we actually held a floating press conference on Little Narragansett Bay to talk about our 8 years of data to a captive audience on one of our vessels.
Great.
And the reason was that we wanted to put forward a call to action, not just say, here's our data,
here's what it means,
and here's what it means. And I think that's a lot of times on the state level, they take a lot of data, they produce a lot of really good reports, which is great for someone who has a background in science, but not for someone on the town level who has to read it and has to interpret it. So we took all of that data from different environmental groups, from the state and whatnot, compiled it into a call to action, and came up with basically a series of 7 to-dos on that list that talked about getting a better understanding of runoff in the downtown section, that looked at reducing fertilizers and campaigns to not feed the birds and to help not feed the birds and pick up after your pet, to look at a water circulation model to understand where water is flowing and why we're getting huge numbers in some areas and some are not. So we have a series of 7 different things that we are looking with and working directly with the communities of Stonington and Westerly to address those.
To make improvements.
So really,
so it's an action plan.
It is an action plan, and it's not just saying you need to do this. We're saying you need to do this, and we can help. We can help identify sources of funding for you. So again, you ask, how can we help communities? We can help with partnering to write grants and to find sources of funding so we can make these changes that need to happen to address these historic water quality issues.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left.
Sure.
So how can our viewers be part of the solution to protect the local harbors and waters?
I think the biggest thing is understanding that we are all connected to it. So everything we do in our everyday lives is connected to it. So if we're walking our dog down the road and we decide not to pick up after it, that can have an impact. You know, if we're feeding the birds off the local park because they look hungry, well, they don't eat bread, and you shouldn't be feeding them in the first place. So not doing that.
And it makes them cluster in one place, which means that increases the nutrients in that
definitely
area.
increase the nutrients. It can destroy the grasses that are there, especially in salt marshes. To look at fertilizers and really, do we need them? To look at, if I own a boat, am I getting my boat pumped out on a frequent basis?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm on a septic system, same thing. Am I getting inspected and pumped out? You know, like there's all these pieces that we can control. You know, above and beyond even just conserving water, there's a lot of things that the individuals can do.
Talk about your plans, your organization's plans for this coming season.
Well, in less than a month, I'll be back on the water, so that's kind of exciting. And mostly because of the fact is that that's really where I see the changes happening. I'll be back to doing water quality testing. We will be back to. We've been working on a blue crab study for the last couple of years, looking at not only just blue crabs, but looking at the species diversity under the water, which is really interesting when you start looking at in terms of warmer waters and whatnot. We will be the plan right now is to have another bi-state meeting. I think at this point probably in the fall, and also dealing with more of these kind of climate change. And the last thing is dealing with some habitat restoration projects. I talked a little bit about the salt marsh program. Those are going to continue. Our monitoring of the marshes are going to continue. Bunch of stuff.
So, do you need volunteers for all of these things? How
course.
can people support what you are doing?
Of course. Like every other organization that's out there, whether they're environmental or not, our success lies in our volunteers. And we always need volunteers, whether that is helping at the South Coast Center, educating future youth about why it's important to protect these natural resources and to learn more about them, whether it's to come to a beach cleanup.
Are you having a beach cleanup
this
year?
We have so many. I mean, I think I don't know the exact
Are they
number.
on your website?
They're on our website, yep, so savebay.org. They're all on our website. International Coastal Cleanup will be coming in the fall. We're the state coordinator for that, so we run close to 100 cleanups around the state. Same thing.
All the same day?
Or at least within the
same weekend.
Same couple weeks or whatnot. So there's always ways to get involved. We have our big Save the Bay swim coming up. We always need
What's
that?
That
is our historic event. This is, I think, our 45th year? 45th. Oh man, I can't remember. 45th?
It's all right.
No,
Old.
40th. Sorry,
okay.
It is 40th. Oh man, sorry about that. Where swimmers basically help to raise money for Save the Bay, and then they swim from the Naval War College in Newport all the way across to Jamestown. It's a 1.7 mile swim.
Wow.
It's our biggest event. It's an amazing event just to watch and to be part of.
So that's on the website
That's
too.
on the website.
Great.
There's plenty of ways to find out on the
like
website. Yep.
one. And I think we have had a Misquamicut photograph. Did that get put up?
I think I saw it. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yep,
I
there it
was
is,
not watching.
That was one
Anyhow,
of our cleanups in Misquamicut.
Okay. So beach cleanups are lots of fun, especially on warm, sunny day when
Yes.
you're in the water and you get wet.
Yes.
So I want to thank you very much,
You're
Dave,
very
for
welcome.
coming and talking about the latest in what you're doing, and for being everyone's advocate for the waters around here. You're doing us a great service.
Thank you.
And we appreciate it, and you're really good at it, and you're also a lot of fun to work with.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you inviting me on. So this is great. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope that you'll join us again next week, next Wednesday at 7 o'clock on SEC TV Channel 12. Thank you.